Was One Piece worth 6 months? I originally tried getting into One Piece a total of 3 separate times before April of this year. I first tried on a call with a friend back in June of around 2022, but didn't pay too much attention to it, in all honesty, since I was talking to somebody on my phone as I was watching. The second instance I tried One Piece was on my own time at some point either late that year or early 2023. But failed to continue the story where Usopp and Kaya are being targeted by Clawhador.
We're uncool, huh? Pirates are nothing more than savages.
Not counting this, but I do remember the day Gear 5 was released and anime sites including Crunchyroll were tweaking for the longest. I remember watching the episode with some of my buddies in a Discord call and being so confused. I remembered a pink dragon, a blue dragon with a funny-ass still frame, Nami in the temple, and just Luffy acting insane with the most crazy animation I've ever seen come from that show. Thirdly, in the fall of 2023, I decided to try the manga out instead of watching the anime, since I was now starting to understand complaints of the pacing in the show. I ended up reading the entire physical copy of Volume 1, and then proceeded to read a handful of chapters on another one of my friend's Shonen Jump accounts. However, I once again stopped the journey prematurely, and I'm sure it was due to the time of when I was reading. I would have rather been reading My Hero Academia's final arc and watched Jujutsu Kaisen's second season weekly instead of starting something long like One Piece. So I just blame that on the era of when I was doing it. And finally, on April 19th of this year, after seeing so many clips of One Piece's crazy animation, not willingly, by the way, just Twitter being Twitter and having it appear on my feed, the most recent clip, and the clip that finally had me fed up with missing out, was from One Piece episode 1125, where Luffy supposedly speed blitzes Kizaru and says, "We're 100 times stronger than we were 2 years ago." I officially started my journey later that week on the 19th of April and ended it on September 6th, and I couldn't have been more grateful for the experience. I'm going to give my ratings on each season listed on Crunchyroll instead of saying each arc, because that would take very long, to say the least. But I will indeed mention arcs that stuck out to me, and also my ratings are based off how much I enjoyed it and how it handled itself based off characters, pacing, and story. East Blue was very difficult for me over the years, but I only blame that on myself for having a weak or destroyed attention span and not the author, Oda, the GOAT. I actually ended up liking each of the characters we were introduced to. I think Kobe, Luffy, Shanks, Zoro, Nami, Usopp, and Sanji, and unfortunately Buggy, were great characters, entertaining in their own ways, and the story was just so simple, yet so wholesome, and once I got to Arlong Park, I was in it for the long haul. East Blue gets a solid 8.5 out of 10. Reverse Mountain, fire. Vivi's whole character, gas. Little Garden slowed the pacing down a bit, but I still very thoroughly enjoyed it, especially the giants. Oh my goodness. Drum Island was crazy. I especially loved Luffy climbing that mountain while carrying Nami and Sanji on his back while running on sheer willpower. I thought that part of the story was absolutely amazing. But the real surprise for me was a character called Chopper and his terribly sad backstory that I still haven't gone back and rewatched because I don't want to see that pain on Chopper again. But if you thought Vivi and Chopper weren't good enough somehow, Crocodile and Nico Rob. Oh my! Anyone who's seen One Piece knows what I mean.
Stop, it's the ship and I'm about to get sad.
But they, to me, are some personal favorites. Though I feel like they hoed Crocodile when he was fighting Luffy. Because, in my opinion, he totally should have been able to win that. But I get it, plot and such. Alabasta gets a 9 out of 10. And I know I didn't mention anything about Logtown, but that's just because I don't want to spoil anybody who hasn't actually seen the show yet and is just here for someone's opinion, especially if they're debating on watching already.
Season 3, Sky Island.
What? I'm sorry. I was just taking a nap! Skypiea was alright. I mean, to me, it definitely wasn't, as good as the previous 2 seasons, but at the bare minimum, it was still interesting and had great moments. Luffy and Bellamy's fight, Blackbeard telling Luffy a man's dream never dies, which in the anime they changed to never ends, but I prefer the official translation in the manga. I like the foreshadowing that happened related to the sun god. I loved the Luffy and Enel fight, as well as Luffy punching the golden bell. And not to mention, this season has the best filler arc in all of One Piece, in my opinion. Skypiea gets a 7.8 out of 10. One Piece's pre-time skip peak. This arc was the shit, man. Cypher Pull, Tom building Goldie Roger's ship, Sanji's dumbass line that he says to Chopper, Spandam's annoying ass, Luffy Gear 2 and 3, Usopp's bravery as Soj King. Oh my goodness. It was peak, and that's not even all of it, it's just the ones off the top of my head. Water 7 and Annie's Lobby are so wonderfully written. I just have to give Oda his flowers personally. Highlights for me in this arc are obviously Usopp, Frankie, Robin, Zoro, and Sanji. And no, I will not go into further depth as to why, because if you know, you know. This arc was so great that when I was on my trip to El Salvador, I was watching it there too, on my family's hammock. And that was only Water 7. I didn't even get to Annie's Lobby yet. Do I think One Piece peaked here? Storytelling-wise, I'd have to say yes. Oda is a great writer, with good handling on each character and story that he wants to introduce, and all of his choices shine in this arc. Water 7 gets a 10 out of 10. I remember seeing a tweet saying something like, "Can we agree this is One Piece's worst arc?" Or, "Name something memorable from this arc." Before I reached Thriller Bark, I was so intrigued by the random-ass skeleton randomly in the poster. Well, after watching the season, it's safe to say... Thriller Bark was such a fun experience, with my only complaint being I wished it was Halloween season when I was watching it. The whole Lola and Nami situation was funny. The Shusui sword being grave robbed from Wano was great world building. And then it being won over by Zoro was the icing on the cake for me. Kuma coming to Thriller Bark was very unexpected and actually had me asking how they even got out of the situation. Gecko Moria was alright. Definitely not the most generational obstacle this far, but he did put up a fight near the end, which I thought was cool. Lastly, my GOAT, Brook. His backstory had me actually shedding a couple tears, and his story connecting with Laboon, which in the end gave him purpose to keep going, and is what makes him join the Straw Hats, was peak. I enjoyed it so much. Thriller Bark gets a 8 out of 10. Absolute banger after banger after banger. Sabaody introducing us to what we now know as the worst generation was so raw. Luffy punching the shit out of that celestial inbred was so tough and so deserved. Kuma sending everyone out of Sabaody was very tragic. It was tragic. But in the end, helpful. Because in truth, they weren't ready yet. Amazon Lily was cool. I actually do think Boa is a really awesome character, at the bare minimum. Impel Down was the cream of the crop. I actually enjoyed Buggy as a character way more now because of this arc. And we also meet Jinbei, and he became a really helpful asset, thankfully. Return of the GOAT happens here. And Ivankov was so underrated. No, he is so underrated. I don't know why to this day people don't glaze him. No one glazes him enough. I don't understand. It's so deserved. He's such a good character. Whatever. I won't get into it. And last but not least, Marineford. I don't know how much I can dive into this without spoiling it, so I'll keep it brief. This arc was wonderful. Ace was a great character. Fuck Akainu. Whitebeard is a goat. Fuck Kizaru. And after Marineford's war ended by Shanks and Kobe aura farming on the Admirals, this would mark the end of One Piece pre-time skip. And it most definitely went out with a bang. Summit War gets a 9.5 out of 10. I dropped One Piece for 2 weeks during this arc. I was at some points only watching one episode a day on my break at work. Fishman Island wasn't the worst thing ever, right? Let's get that straight. But it was the only time in One Piece where the pacing was slower than me in math class. I was so annoyed and bored that I scrolled and looked through the rest of the seasons, and then I see Fishman Island Saga sandwiched between 2 Egghead arcs. Long story short, I finished the arc with the remake instead, which, by the way, only took 5 episodes to do. But I had around 20, I think, left in the original. The intro was a banger. Everybody gets an outfit change too, and Nami loses her shirt. But I give her props for being a proud woman in her own skin. The Joy Boy teasing was fun, and I actually sat up like that Leonardo DiCaprio meme when I heard that bell sound, which I recognized because I saw the Gear 5 episode when it released. Poseidon was cool. Shirahoshi was, she was fine. I'm also aware people think this arc ruined Sanji's character, but I honestly don't remotely even think that, because to me, it seemed perfectly in character for him to act the way he did during this. Luffy and Big Mom's phone call near the end had me really excited and actually gave me something to look forward to, thankfully. Fishman Island gets a 5 out of 10. I know it's a harsher rating, but it really just wasn't my cup of tea. That's all, and that's okay. I think Law and Kinemon are amazing additions to the story, and I was so glad I actually found something interesting again, because I've liked the show so far. But I don't know, Fishman Island kind of threw me off. Caesar's experimentation on children in hopes of creating giants was wild, but they go the extra level to add in the fact that he's working for Doflamingo, creating these artificial devil fruits. And even though I find his dub voice actor so funny, the character is actually just a bum loser. But yet another great addition to the story. We learn Punk Hazard is the way that it is because Admirals Aokiji and Akainu both preferred being Fleet Admiral over the other. Their 10-day battle forever changes the island's climate, which is just so insane. Oh, and Smoker's there too, I guess. Punk Hazard gets a 7.4 out of 10. Ace's Devil Fruit tournament was wild. One of the craziest things in One Piece to me is that Devil Fruits respawn once their user gets cooked. I thought Doflamingo was terrifying, and Law's backstory was so tragic. The whole toys being actual real humans who couldn't remember themselves isn't a new concept per se, which is why I low-key didn't care about that part of the story, but I recognized it was important, and it all came together nicely in the end. I remember seeing the Sabo's story episode on my way to Hershey Park, so maybe I'm biased, but I really enjoyed that a lot. I wasn't really fond over the new characters in this arc. Yes, I know that's crazy, especially after they showed Rebecca's story to you 2 million times. Luffy's gears were always something I knew about before even starting One Piece, so I wasn't shocked about his Gear 4 look. But I did, however, not expect it to happen, let alone be cool. I always saw images of his forms and thought the fourth one
So ass.
and after watching the series, I can safely say it was glorious. And he did indeed make the most out of it. Like, he really he did the most every time he used that form. But, unfortunately, it was never a match for the Emperors of the Sea. Admiral Fujitora had me on the edge of my seat and levitating every time he did a crazy attack. His speech in the arc was so beautiful and makes me smile every time I hear it because he really does give Luffy his flowers and made me think about how far Luffy has really come since the beginning of the story. Beautiful arc. Dressrosa gets a 7.9 out of 10. Zou was a pretty short arc, but I enjoyed it for what it was, which is pretty much just exposition and learning about the Mink tribe. Brooks' song about Cat Viper was amazing. More Brooks songs and more Brook jokes equal a healing world, if you didn't know. We also learn about Sanji's disappearance and why he's gone, which leads us into the next arc, one I absolutely love and adore. Zou gets a 8 out of 10. People apparently think the pacing in this arc is bad. I didn't think anything about this arc was bad, including the pacing. Sanji's backstory got even sadder. I swear, no one in anime shows has a good childhood, man. Like, damn! You can pretty much sum up the first half of this arc to being a save Sanji arc. I got flashbacks to Usopp and Luffy's battle during a certain part of this season. I thoroughly enjoyed Big Mom and all her 87 children. They were intimidating, strong, and enjoyable to watch. I enjoyed Nami, Brook, and Luffy in this arc, but let's not take the appreciation away from my other goat, Capone Veggie! Holy carry if I've ever seen one. I personally think his Devil Fruit is one of the best in the entire series due to the range he has and how he uses it. It's this man made a fortress. His Devil Fruit has to be up there. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care. That's not even everything about this arc though. Of course, I'm not going to explain everything that happens in each of these, so I'll just leave it with this. Whole Cake Island gets a 9.8 out of 10. The shortest arc in all of One Piece, not counting filler arcs because those exist for some reason. I messed with it. I like the fact that the anime adapted it in a way to where it shows you flashbacks relating to what the episode was about. We learn that the Revolutionary Army is trying to rescue Kuma, who was enslaved as punishment for helping the Straw Hats out in Sabaody. I like how the story introduced people the Straw Hats have met and helped to each other, and loved the building up to Wano that's been happening simultaneously. Reverie gets a 8.7 out of 10. We finally made what the story has been building up to since we first even heard of the Emperors. I loved how much Zoro got to shine in this arc. I loved all the samurai. I loved Odin and watching his entire history with Whitebeard and Roger and his samurai. I enjoyed all the twists and turns this story took during this arc. I loved Otama's relationship with the Straw Hats and loved Momonosuke being the child of Odin. I enjoyed the whole time travel situation that happened with the samurai. I think this arc was amazing. I obviously turned into a big fan of Kid and Law after it, and I was just so happy watching this entire season. It's the longest arc in all of One Piece, yet I finished it faster than Fishman Island. I loved Kaido, King, Queen as main villains, and even though I thought Black Maria was lame, she did end up giving Sanji some extra character growth in the end, so I guess that was fine. Fuck! Orochi. I don't know what Oda was thinking, letting him live as long as he did when he provided nothing extra to the story after a certain point, but that's just my take on him. I think Yamato being as important as he was in this arc was a very good choice to make. And yes, I know who he's related to, but Oda still had the option to just leave him in the temple instead of being useful, and I believe he made the right call. I loved the 1000th chapter episodes and couldn't have been more appalled at how good the art direction was shining in episode 10-15. I thought the addition to Luffy's past was a fun choice to make, but it wasn't really necessary to add in the middle of the arc, in my opinion. Big Mom and Kaido's battles, respectively, were great, with so much love put into the actual adaptation that every other episode I was trying my hardest not to shout at how good everything was. And lastly, Gear 5th. My thoughts on it are, I believe it's completely in character for Luffy. No, it wasn't a cop-out. Luffy always had an interesting devil fruit. So his being Nika's human fruit isn't an out-of-nowhere development. It's been foreshadowed many times throughout the story, with the earliest being Skypiea. Luffy embodies Nika, the sun god, and the meaning of true liberation itself. Freedom perfectly. And I, as a viewer, as a fan, couldn't have been prouder at how this story turned out. Wano gets a 10 out of 10. I know that there were more members of the worst generation in this arc, but let's be honest, they're bums and not worth mentioning. So let's move on. This arc isn't finished yet, but by the time it is, it'll be another 10 out of 10. I feel like Oda saw how well the new gen mangas were doing and decided to take a very specific page out of their books. Speaking of shonens like Jujutsu Kaisen, Dandadan, My Hero Academia, Sakamoto Days, Chainsaw Man, you know those. Oda locked in. He went all out with the fights in this arc. Law versus Blackbeard, Luffy versus Lucci's rematch, the Seraphim versus the Straw Hats, Law versus Kid, Gart versus Kuzan, Buggy's head versus Crocodile and Mihawk, Kobe's honesty impact on Hachinosu, Kizaru versus Sentomaru, Zoro versus Lucci, Luffy versus Kizaru, Luffy versus Saturn. The list goes on, okay? And there's 100% more to come. Now, as for the story, this arc has had great storytelling. I've felt so immersed with little to no complaints. Let me think of a complaint. Oh, can't find one. No complaints. Vegapunk's storyline has been amazing. And Kuma's storyline was even better. I cried so many manly tears during this mini arc with him and Bonnie. I thought the backstories couldn't get worse than Law's or Sanji's or Chopper's or anybody else's, but oh my god, I'm wrong. I was wrong. Imu, the Elders, and the Eternal Flame are so interesting to learn about, and Vegapunk broadcasting the truth about the Void Arrow was so beautifully done. So far, Egghead has been absolute peak, and I felt so fulfilled now that I'm caught up to this beautiful, unfinished story that has been ongoing since 1999. Egghead Island gets a 9.9 out of 10. And I recognize it's not finished, but when it is, if they keep nailing it like they are now, it'll be another 10 out of 10.
Manga.
I realize that the manga has moved on to something called Elbaf Island, which I'm pretty sure is home of the Giants and is currently in the midst of an insane flashback about God Valley, which I only witnessed through the eyes of a young Kuma in the Egghead flashbacks. I haven't caught up with the manga, but I'm sure by the time this video's up, I'm already caught up. But from what I've seen so far, Oda's art is so interesting to me. It has a very specific flair to it that no other manga I've read has really even tried to mimic. I can appreciate his paneling and the way he's making the story go, but unfortunately, that's all I can really say so far. However, I cannot wait to catch up. I haven't seen any yet, but I'll be watching One Piece Red for more Uta and Luffy interactions, even though I know it's not canon. And now I'm officially done with One Piece. So let's ask the question again. Was One Piece worth 6 months? My answer is yes. One Piece is a very original, consistently good, heartfelt, enjoyable, gut-wrenching series that will have you hooked at multiple different parts and make you binge wherever you are at whatever time. Almost every character has had so much love and passion behind them that you can't help but feel so attached and hope that they don't get axed. I was never a One Piece hater, but I simultaneously never had any reason to really get into it. Show it love. I fully understand. This series is unlike any other, unless you're Grey's Anatomy, which has holy shit, 22 seasons? It's definitely a commitment, and I most likely could have finished quicker if I was jobless and not continuing school, but I don't really mind that part. I caught up and enjoyed mostly every arc, and think everyone should give this show a try whenever the time's right for them. One Piece is so beautifully crafted, I have to give the author Ichiro Oda and his team their flowers, along with the Toei Animation staff for really bringing such a wonderful story to life. I also saw that there's a live action happening, so I'll probably watch that too eventually to see what it's hitting off of, see what it's about. I also saw that Attack on Titan's old animation studio, WIT Studio, is going to be in charge of the remake of One Piece, which is fine. It'll give me an excuse to rewatch it, and it'll also drag even more traction towards the series due to the different style that they're using and different amount of episodes. So I support it. As a final regards on this video, I want to say thank you so much if you made it this far. I'm fairly new to this type of content, so if you're a fan of this kind of stuff, I'd appreciate it so much if you could tell me in the comments what you actually thought about the video, and if you agreed or didn't agree. I'd also appreciate if you subscribed, left a like, and maybe recommended me to a friend. I'm planning to really grow this channel, and hopefully this video reaches the right people for me. So to wrap up this video and answer the question one last time, yes, One Piece was worth 6 months.